plow ahead, hopefully. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the December 11th, 2012 meeting of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust, and welcome you all here. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 13th meeting. These have been distributed to the trustees. Are there any questions or comments as the minutes were distributed?
No questions, but would like to move approval.
Approval?
Second.
Have a motion made and seconded. Please cast your votes. And it's approved. All right. Next item on our agenda is the approval, ratification of some claims that the trust paid in the last month. These were given to the trustees prior to today's meeting. Are there any questions on the expenses listed here? Most of them are associated with TIF. We're just a sterile conduit for TIF projects, and we passed them here. There were two gold expenditures. One audit service, which is pretty self-explanatory. The other one was I2E, and we're going to hear from them later today. And the third was a general economic development payment. I guess it came out of gold bonds.
No, that came from a transfer from the general fund. This is the reimbursement for marketing expenses for the first year at the Outlet Mall. And those funds are transferred to the trust from the city's general fund.
Are there any questions or further comments about the expenses? Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
A motion made and approved. Any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is items for individual consideration. We've got several to talk about today. First one, item 4A, is amendment number 2 to contract for engineering services for some improvements made in the Oklahoma River. Would anybody like to make some comments about it, Kathy?
I am not terribly familiar with this one. It is an amendment to the engineering fees associated with the construction of the Meridian Landing. This is a part of TIF 4. I think that the consulting engineers on the project have had to do a little bit of extra work in order to implement these improvements.
Are there any questions from trustees? It's a relatively small amount, but it still deserves our scrutiny. Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And the item is approved. Thank you very much. Item 4B, receive consultant review committee report for Project 180, Package 6 and 7. Are there any questions or comments about this one? Eric, would you like to say some words about this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As your next agenda item, we're going to give you an update as to the status of Project 180, but the item that you're considering at the moment is the next two consultants for streetscape packages 6 and 7 for Project 180. So as you may recall, packages 1 through 5 were those previously approved packages, and so what you have is a recommendation today for package 6, Tetra Tech, package 7, Smith Roberts Ballishweiler. They previously performed on Project 180, and so we actually did a shortened selection process interviewing just those consultants that had previously done work, and so with that today we make this recommendation for your consideration.
Eric, can you tell us briefly where Projects 6 and 7 are?
If I might, Mr. Chairman, we have a map that will be included in the presentation on the very next item.
Thank you. Are there any questions on item 4B?
Go ahead. I was just going to ask, what range will the fees be, do you expect?
You know, I think traditionally in engineering I would suspect package 6 is approximately a $13 million package. I would suspect something in the 8%, maybe up to the 9% range, but again, we have to negotiate those with those consultants, and we have not begun that yet. Today would be authorization to begin those negotiations. We'd bring a contract back to you for your consideration next month.
So would that be in the range of the ones that have been already
We would expect it to be consistent with the previously approved contracts, yes.
Any further questions?
No, but would like to move approval.
Motion made to approve. Is there a second? Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Please cast your votes. And the item is approved. Thank you very much. And Eric, I understand C is a report you're going to give us.
Item C is a resolution to present to you a revised budget and scope related to Project 180. In the presentation today, we're proposing to increase the budget for Project 180 from about $157 million to $176 million. And Eric Winger, the city's Public Works Director, is here to kind of walk you through Project 180, where we are today, and what some of the future projects will look like, and the resulting increase in the project budget.
Eric, you've got the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've obviously had tremendous progress in the past year, and you've probably seen a lot of that even just outside City Hall here where we're having our meeting today. There is still some barricades that are up when we talk about Project Package 5 on Project 180, but again, you're starting to see streets reopen, you're starting to see sidewalks reopen, and so today we've got a presentation to kind of show you where we've been and where we would like to advance the next phases of construction. As we kind of look at an outline, and this is a presentation that we took to the DIC last week, this is one that we would obviously forward to the City Council for discussion. So maybe a few things here that you're more familiar with than, say, the public, but we wanted to make sure that we put a comprehensive understanding together for everyone. So we've got a project history, discussion of the budget, the scope of work, and also the schedule. When we look at the history of Project 180, recall that the project began back in 2009, and there was an implementation agreement. There were steering committees, there were committees for the streetscapes, there were committees for the Myriad Botanical Gardens, and also the Bicentennial Park. And so there was a lot of discussion about the project, about the details, about how we would expect to see a vibrant downtown. Traffic study was completed in November of 2009. There were several streetscape design elements that were proposed, and then, of course, the overall goals were to provide a clean, uniform, pedestrian-friendly atmosphere for downtown. These are some of those street elements. We've got the street lights that you'll see in the upper left-hand corner. Of course, the benches, the bike racks, and the waste receptacles, many of those which are distributed downtown, and surely you've seen some of these on the streets already. Some of the other elements, and some of these are being installed now, so if you wanted to visit one of these after the meeting, on the south side of Main Street, just in front of 420 West Main, just down the sidewalk to the east, you'll see one of these destination markers. And these were some of the artistic elements that were being placed into some of the sidewalks, but it generally shows an Oklahoma City map grid, and it shows something that was historically prominent at that particular location. So on this one, you'll see there's kind of a little silver circle. Obviously, we can't read what's on the ring of that, but there's several of these that will be installed throughout the downtown area. The other thing that kind of notes the completion of progress is the installation of the new parking meters. And so these are some of the pay and display parking meters that I think many are starting to be more familiar with. When we look at the street lighting aspects, obviously there's a lot of the new silver-colored poles that are in the downtown area. A lot of the streets are now lined with trees, and we have the pedestrian-friendly zones. We've got on-street parking in many new areas, and of course the updated traffic signals as well. This is Package 1 streetscape at Reno Avenue, and obviously this is one of those that opened up early. This would be near the Myriad Botanical Gardens, but we're seeing a lot of use of all those new elements. Seems that there's a lot more people out walking. There's a lot more people visiting the park. Obviously, the enhancements in the parking are providing opportunities for people to visit and making sure that with metering, parking spaces are available, encouraging somewhat of a turnover to make sure that we're getting a lot of visitors in and out of the park. We look at Package 2. We look at Harvey Roadway. Obviously, this is a little bit more in the heart of downtown, but again, a lot of the same elements. We're looking at on-street parking. We're looking at accessibility and enhancements to the building frontages. Package 3 is Main Street Sidewalk, and this is a picture of that median. It was completed earlier this year, but again, a lot of expansive space, consistent colors, thematic design throughout downtown. Package 4, this is a package that we're wrapping up now. The final work is underway on Hudson Avenue, but we have Sheridan Median in Hudson during the Festival of the Arts. We will be, hopefully in the next week, converting Hudson to two-way traffic officially. So look forward to that press release coming out here maybe later this week or early next week. But work is wrapping up on those packages. And finally, Package 5, which is the last of the currently contracted packages. This is the area around City Hall and the Civic Center Music Hall. There are a few panels of concrete remaining for the cars. There is the amenity zones that are being wrapped up. But again, work of installation of trees is underway. You'll notice several new tree pits have been dug in the last few days, and so this is work that we expect to finish up in the next month. When we talk about the Mary Botanical Gardens, obviously one of the centerpieces of Project 180, and it's been open for some time, but improving programming, the children's garden, the dog release areas, the rentable spaces, the band shell, the restaurant, and of course the water features. And these are some of those elements that are there. Obviously this is well lit for downtown in December. There's a lot of activity. As I go to this next slide, the ice rink, of course, has been a central place of a lot of focus, and we're seeing a lot of activity that's there this month. The Bicentennial Park, hopefully you were able to see that today as well. It's one that is nearly complete. They're doing the punch list. They've recently are doing the finishing touches on the Bicentennial Monument that was returned to the park. But of course it has a grand lawn with a stage, pavilions for pre-function spaces for the Civic Center Music Hall, the new fountain, and the updated landscaping and lighting. This was the rendering that was proposed, and of course this is exactly what it looks like today. We've got the signs are installed, the sidewalks. Obviously the trees are not leafed out with the winter, but this is an actual picture of the fountain on the left with it being lit during the evening. This is the landscaping that you see on the right. And so when we start talking about those sweeping elements of the park, there's been the opportunity to create new access, new entrances. It's a lot more pedestrian friendly than the earlier version. This is the map, the first version of the map that I'm going to show you today. Everything that you see in blue is either completed or it's just finishing construction. So there's been a lot of work when we look at streetscape packages 1 through 5. If you look at the area at the bottom center, it's green. That's the Mary Botanical Gardens. If you look to the left, you also see 2 other smaller green spaces. You'll see the Bicentennial Park. Of course, you also see City Hall Lawn, which is one of the projects that is being proposed today. So there's been a lot of progress in downtown, and as we move to this next slide, talking about the next phases, we're looking at Package 6, we're looking at Package 7, a pedestrian plaza project, City Hall lawn project, and the final project at the McGee Center. To begin that discussion, we look at the revenues, and these are figures that you've seen before. We've broken the revenues into 2 categories, the non-trust funds and the trust funds. You'll see that the trust funds are still comprised of GEO bonds. There's also the AQUIT or the water utility funds, and then there's also the other category, and the other is grants. It's also CIP that was included as a part of the revenue. When you look at the trust funds, we've got the Devon loan proceeds, we've got the TIF 8 bond proceeds, the sales tax. We also have another category on the the trust funds. That was the donation from Devon as part of the Bicentennial Park. So this is the total revised budget of $176,331,668. How are those funds used? And so here's the proposed budget. Now this page, I know it has a lot of small text, but we finished a lot of projects. If I call your attention to the top 2 bullets, these are the administrative or the completed projects. These would be the consulting contracts. These would be the architectural and engineering services for the gardens. In the middle section, you'll actually see the completed projects like the gardens, streetscapes packages 1 through 5, the Bicentennial Park, the pedestrian corridor. In the bottom portion, you're going to see the projects that are under design or those that we have included in this next phase. And so that's where you'll find streetscape number 6, streetscape number 7, the pedestrian plaza at $4 million, the City Hall lawn at $2.2, the McGee Center at $354,000, and then finally other, which includes program contingency. So the total expenses will match the total revenues at $176 million. The McGee Center project, this is to show you a little bit of a before and after. It has not been completed, but when the Mary Botanical Gardens was recently renovated, there was an area that's in the basement of the main administration building that you see in the upper left that wasn't included in the renovation plans. It is a public space. It has a couple of restrooms. It has a commons area, and it has some air conditioning and heating needs that need to be upgraded. One of the projects that's being proposed is this project at $350,000 to make sure that this space that wasn't included in the original construction is a part of a future phase. When we talk about streetscape packages 6 and 7, we're talking about using similar design elements that we've seen on packages 1 through 5. And so, again, as we talk about amenity zones with pavers, the trash receptacles, the bike racks, trees, the other elements, we're expecting to see a lot of the same in packages 6 and 7. So the same renderings that we've shown before would apply to those future phases. The pedestrian plaza project, This is a project that was started as a part of the original projects, but to give you an idea of what we're talking about with pedestrian plaza, this is an area that you'll see that's with the orange and also the green. At the top of the drawing is Park Avenue. On the east side of the drawing, or the right side of the drawing is Robinson. On the left is Harvey. And at the bottom, you can see it's bound by Devon and the IRS building. There's a space that has the opportunity to also be created into a park. And so we have assigned a total budget of $4 million to go and do some similar Project 180 enhancements to this area as a part of a future phase. The next project is the City Hall lawn. Many of you may recall this was an ad alternate to the Bicentennial Park that we chose not to accept. It's one that we have an opportunity to go back and look at the design again. Remember that the original concept of the City Hall lawn was to extend some of the elements from the Bicentennial Park east into City Hall, making that more of a combined project or a campus-type project. So you're going to see a lot of the same design features when I showed the earlier rendering with some of the sweeping wall design. You see some of the landscaping and some of the other improvements. Now, what's not anticipated is that we would level City Hall. We would keep a lot of the landscaping, if not the majority of the landscaping. It was recently renovated. It looks nice today, but there are some complementary items that we could add to City Hall that would help bridge across from the Bicentennial Park. So some of the major elements that we're talking about is renovation of the existing fountain that's on the east side, and then looking into some opportunities to put some of the sweeping elements, upgrading some of the sidewalks, taking care of some of the ADA accessibility issues and some things on the City Hall project. This is one that's budgeted at $2.2 million. When we look at the overall budget for these projects, we're going to be carrying forward all the same logic that we used recently. We talk about budgeting the projects to include project contingency. This assures that we can finish the projects for the budget assigned. It makes sure that we can pay for change orders and unforeseens that may come up during construction. We've also recommended the use, again, of a program contingency. That way, if there's something that is out of the ordinary that needs to be addressed, we can simply come to the trust and come to the City Council seeking program contingency funding usage so that we don't have to diminish one of the other projects. So we've also budgeted this number is about $3.8 million to make sure that we can finish Project 180. If we look at packages 6 and 7, and this would be the drawing that Chairman mentioned in the previous item, the areas that are in brown and yellow are the streetscape packages 6 and 7. 6 is in yellow, 7 is in brown. If you look at the areas on package 6, and the reason that we're suggesting that those go first, you'll find that the Sandridge campus, which is currently under construction in the upper right-hand portion of the drawing, these would be the streets around Sandridge so that when that work is completed, we also have the streetscape packages completed simultaneously. We've also received a grant on EK Gaylord, and so at the lower right of the drawing, we're proposing that proceed forward as we can take advantage of about $750,000 in grant funds to complete that also with Project 180 as well. Now, one of the things that we're looking to do much differently, and some of the common changes, and we recognize that there was room for improvement in how the previous packages were constructed, is advancing the construction 2 to 3 blocks at a time. So we have opportunity to reformat how we did the projects. I think many of you recall how the park was constructed, where concrete barricades were put up. There were some vertical walls that were put on top of those concrete barricades that had some artistic type elements to them, separating construction from pedestrians, separating construction from traffic. So allow the contractor to work diligently in a 2 or 3 block area while we protect the pedestrian and protect traffic movement. When they finish that 2 or 3 block section, open it up and then start the next 2 or 3 block sections. So instead of demolishing and uncovering 8 or 10 blocks at a time, we'll do 2 or 3 blocks at a time in a phased approach. And so I would tell you from a lessons learned standpoint, that's something that we would combine as we would go into packages 6 and 7 and make sure that we're coordinated, make sure that we're not taking out parallel streets, much different than when we, say, did Walker and Hudson. Don't take 2 north-south streets out at the same time. Make sure that that's coordinated. So as we come forward to you with future bid packages, you might see how those are arranged, and we should know more as we engage those architects and engineers to work on the projects on how best to approach that. The schedule is something that is very general at this time, but we have the opportunity to work on the McGee Center immediately. It's a small project that we could bid as early as next spring of 2013. Streetscape 6 is one that we think that requires about 6 months of design. We could have bidding on 6 as early as next summer, 2013. The pedestrian plaza, fall of 2013. As we talk about staggering 6 and 7, we may be able to finish the plans for 7 earlier, but we would want to coordinate that so, again, that we're only working in limited areas, but we could go in as early as winter of 2013. And then the last project would be City Hall lawn in the spring of 2014. The reason for the delay on the City Hall lawn is there is a new parking garage that's being proposed just south of City Hall, so that we don't have competing contractors working on adjacent sites. Again, we would purposely delay the construction of City Hall lawn to make sure that the garage was substantially complete or nearly finished before we started new construction. But with that, as we move forward, we're very confident with the budget for the project. We're very confident with the scope of the project, and we're ready to proceed on a schedule with some changes on how we would do construction that I think will be much more received in the heart of downtown. And so with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Are there questions for Eric? Yeah, Jim? Rhonda?
Eric, with the phased approach on Streetscape 6 and 7, what will that do to impact the overall timing of completion of the construction project?
The early indications that we have in visiting, and again, these are very early indications from the contractors, is that it will probably have little impact. They obviously will just focus in a much smaller space moving forward. We anticipate, obviously, with the introduction of the barricades and some things, that we may pay a small premium just to have some additional things other than just having some cones and snow fencing, but we think it's minor compared to the overall budget. So we believe when we look at the packages individually, from the time that we start to the time that we say finish an individual package, probably in the 18-month, maybe 20-month time frame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry if you've covered this and I missed you mention, but what is the McGee Center?
The McGee Center is a public space. It's in the basement area of the Mary Botanical Gardens Administrative Office area. It's a space that it's directly below spaces that we renovated when the gardens was completed a couple of years ago. This would just be a project that we would extend the same features, new floors, new painted walls, new ceilings, new lighting, restroom upgrades to match that already that's in the same building.
Okay. And the pedestrian plaza that you described, what of that shaded area is currently owned by a public entity as opposed to private ownership of those neighboring towers?
All of it. It's
All of that is
all
owned?
owned by the Urban Renewal Authority.
All the way to the curtilage of the building?
Yep.
Okay. So the $4 million is design and construction of that space?
It's the total project cost, so it's all the design, the construction, the contingency, all the work. So it wouldn't just be construction, it's the total budget.
Okay. It seemed high to me compared to the amount of square area that is the City Hall lawn, that you'd spend twice as much on the corridor between a few buildings.
I think we have a lot of opportunity at the City Hall lawn to preserve a lot of the landscaping, to preserve a lot of the lawn that's already here, and really I think with the lesser budget at City Hall, we can just enhance what's already here. So if we take just some of the common design elements out of the Bicentennial Park and improve them, but again, don't take down all the trees and don't take down all the landscaping that was actually just recently replaced not too terribly long ago, we think that would be one reason that the budget at City Hall is less. As we look at the pedestrian plaza, there are a lot of unknowns. We have an architect that's ready to design that, and I think as we would establish a budget, we'd have them come back, obviously, as they finish a preliminary report, present that to you and show you what all those amenities might be. Honestly, today it's hard to tell, and so we've established the budget just based on real general assumptions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, subject to appropriate here or when we get to item D, I'd appreciate some information that correlates the issuance of the bonds presumed in item D and some of the budget items proposed within item C here. Thank you.
City Hall Park redevelopment, will the fountain be retained?
Yes, we look to keep the fountain and actually renovate it, making it operational on a more consistent basis. It's obviously suffering from its age. It does need some upgraded components, and that would be something included in the project, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Larry.
One quick question going back. And where do we stand on locating all of the statues and markers, et cetera, out of the Bicentennial Park?
All the markers at the Bicentennial Park were surveyed as a part of the park project. The Parks Department has assisted greatly in making sure that they get relocated to prominent locations. We have returned a lot of the monuments, like the Bicentennial Monument itself is back in the park. The several of the statues are finding new homes. The Stanley Draper statue has been recently approved for relocation to the east side of City Hall. But I would need to visit with Director Wendell Wisenhunt just to make sure that I don't give you misinformation, but I do know that that's been something that's been very closely monitored. They do have locations for all those, many of which are going back into the park.
So they do have locations for all of them as we sit here right now.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Are there additional questions? The chair would entertain a motion on item C.
Move it.
Motion made and second.
Second?
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And item C is approved. Thank you. And item D is a resolution regarding some bonds the trust would like to issue the city would like to issue, rather, in terms of paying off the debt we incurred from Devon as part of that TIF project. And Kathy, could you answer Jim's questions now about the budget?
Sure, we'll try to walk through some of the details on the budget and how it relates back to the bond issue. In the budget you just approved is about $121 million in revenues from the Economic Development Trust. Those include $95 million that were a part of the Devon interim loan that was made to the city in order to begin the Project 180 improvements. We are also proposing to issue an additional $15.5 million to provide the complete funding necessary for the $121 million that you just approved in the budget. So part of the bond issue includes the issuance of funds for the completion of Project 180. One of the other things that I need to point out is that the documents that are associated with the tax increment financing district include something called a project plan. And the project plan is the official document that the city council adopts that sets out the goals of the TIF district, its purposes, the projects it's going to complete, and it includes a budget. And the original budget for TIF 8 was $175 million. And it included $115 million for the public improvements. They were called the redevelopment framework in the project plan. It also included $40 million for economic developments and $20 million for the other taxing jurisdictions. We are in the process of taking forward an amendment to the project plan for TIF 8 to address the change in the budget from $115 million for public improvements to $121 million for the public improvements. We've also determined that the capacity for TIF 8 is slightly less than what we originally had anticipated. And some of this is due to the fact that we did not receive as much revenues on a cash basis as what we originally anticipated, mostly from the sales tax revenues that Devon was projected to pay on the construction of its building. They were able to not spend quite as much on construction materials, and that resulted in fewer sales tax revenues that were available to make cash purchases towards Project 180. So therefore, the amount that we need to borrow and the debt capacity associated with the TIF district changed. So now the total budget for TIF 8 will be about $157 million, and that amended TIF budget is also shown in the memo for item C, if you're curious about it. So it shows the amendment for the redevelopment framework category to $121 million. Other economic development will be reduced to $24 million, and the amount for the other taxing jurisdictions reduced to $12 million, for a total of $157 million. So the next item on your agenda is item D, and it authorizes the issuance of $155 million in bonds by the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust that will be backed by the revenues paid by the Devon TIF district and a moral obligation pledge by the city. The bonds will be used to fund the $121 million in public improvements for Project 180. It will also be used to pay some capitalized interest and some interest that we will accrue before the bond proceeds are available. So we have some interest costs that we have to take care of. and it will also leave a small amount of money available that can be set aside for that other economic development category and the other taxing jurisdictions, and I think it's about $6 million. But we will have that amount available. A couple of things to point out. Right now is a very favorable interest rate environment for issuing the debt. The debt isn't due until 2015, but because we are at a point in the project and the interest rate environment is so good, we would like to proceed with the issuance of the bonds and get this step taken care of in the process of the TIF 8 and Project 180. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. I think.
What would be the all-in underwriting fees would you estimate or guess?
We have representatives from the city's finance department here that might have a better idea about that than I would.
Morning or afternoon, Kenton Soodle, Assistant Finance Director. Those have not been determined yet. That's part of what we have to negotiate with the underwriters that have already been selected. On a bond deal that would be $155 million, those fees may be in the $1 million to $1.5 million range. But percentage-wise, we have not negotiated that yet. Normally, we look at about, it's probably in the range of 1%, probably 1%. Yeah, in fact, the resolution in front of you today limits that at 1.5%. We always set that a little bit high, but that's probably what we're looking at.
Are there additional questions? Jim?
Thank you. I too share Frank's concern about cost of issuance when you got an amount this much. I've always thought bond counsel and underwriters do a great job, but the decimal effect is pretty amazing when you think about a $10 million school bond and $155 or more million city bond. So hopefully there's some economy to be achieved in those negotiations, in addition to what I thought I saw read in one of the memos, that there may be staggered series associated with these bonds over time, that maybe we don't get hit again and again if we can enjoy some favored terms up front. A couple questions, Kathy, building on what you shared. Maybe the only trustee that doesn't know this, so I appreciate everyone's patience, but what is the duration of TIF 8?
It's 25 years, and it started 3 years ago.
Okay. And the bonds that we would issue under item D would be likely for what duration?
20?
The structure that's contemplated right now is a 21-year bond issue. As Kathy said, part of the bond issue would also fund the reserve fund that would probably be required. It would fund capitalized interest until we receive the first minimum payment from that TIF district, which I believe would be next year. So, but right now we're looking at 21-year bonds on this deal.
And so I guess it's safe to assume that later series would have a shorter duration to time with
Yes.
the expiration of TIF 8.
We would absolutely be limited by the end life of the TIF district would be the maximum maturity at any point in time that we issue these bonds.
Okay. And then could you all help me understand the economic development component within this and the $24 million that was referenced, and then the idea of other economic development over the series of the debt?
When TIF 8 was created, it was the desire of Devon to set aside some money to attract other headquarters or other companies to downtown Oklahoma City. They believed that the purpose of the public improvements was to build this world-class environment that would be attractive to other headquarters companies, so they wanted to set aside a part of the tax increment proceeds to be used by the city to help attract companies to downtown Oklahoma City. So that's the purpose of that project in it. The money that is designated for the other taxing jurisdictions, similar to what we did in TIF number 2, we have set aside some money for the other governmental jurisdictions that receive property tax revenues, so that they can use some of this money to fund projects that they may have, they have to be within the project area of TIF number 8, which is, Northwest 13th Street, I-235, Classen Boulevard on the west, and Southwest 27th Street on the south. So pretty large project area, but that's where they have to spend the money. But that money is available to the school district, the career tech system, the county, for capital projects or projects that would fit within the parameters of the Local Development Act.
Okay, thank you. On that point about the economic development, it sounds like a worthy cause. I have total faith in you while you're here, but the duration of these bonds are going to exceed all of us. So I'm curious, what safeguards are in place to avoid arbitrage issues and risk associated with a pool of proceeds that hasn't been used over the life of the program?
Great question. It's it's anticipated these bonds are going to be issued as taxable bonds, so there would not be the arbitrage or the other issues that you encounter with tax-exempt bonds. We'd be able to, any additional proceeds above the Project 180 budget that would go towards these other uses could sit there for however long the decision makers decide to let it sit there.
Okay. And is that type of enticement defined anywhere?
There is a description that's included in the project plan. Actually, we're amending the project plan to include that description. There was one in the Devon Implementation Agreement, which was an agreement that was entered into by the city, the Economic Development Trust, the Urban Renewal Authority, and Devon. But we felt that so that it does live on beyond the life of possibly the Devon Implementation Agreement, that we should put it in the project plan, because that's the document that has to last for the 25-year duration of the TIF district. So there is a definition, and it talks about companies that are new or existing in Oklahoma but wish to locate to downtown Oklahoma City.
Okay. And will that amended project plan come back to this trust?
It will not. It is not something that's approved by the trust, is my understanding. It is approved by the city council, and then the city council directs the Economic Development Trust to kind of carry out the functions or the funding missions of the TIF district.
Okay. I saw a reference to 2/3 majority vote of the council required on the issuance, and I think a supermajority on the waiver of competitive bidding.
That's correct.
Okay. The last question, I know you mentioned that the sales tax projections were less because they were able to secure construction materials less. Is the ad valorem receipts anticipation still the target? And there's been no movement up or down on that?
It's what we originally projected.
Okay. Thank you.
What covenants would trigger repayment? What would be the covenant? What type covenants would trigger require the city to repay early?
It's probably a question for bond counsel. However, while some of the documents are in draft form right now, we will probably have some minimum revenue coverage requirement, which I'm guessing, and talking with our financial advisor and the underwriters, is probably going to just be a 1-to-1, because it's a city moral obligation is really kind of the first pledge. The TIF revenues are really sort of the second pledge on this deal. Of course, anything that we wouldn't comply with, like disclosing, financial information, tax revenue information, that sort of thing. But I think it's really going to be the other, probably the major one would be if the city ever chose not to renew the moral obligation, because it's required to be renewed annually.
Larry?
Yeah, if I understood correctly, the $24 million for economic development and the $12 million for the other taxing jurisdictions, in this sale of bonds that we're contemplating doing, we're not going to be selling the bonds to cover all of that $36 million. We're going to have to come out later on as these taxing jurisdictions or the economic development projects emerge to sell additional bonds to fund those. Am I correct on that, Kathy?
Yes, or I think there's a definite possibility that we will be able to cash fund a great deal of those kinds of requests in the future, that we're not going to be using all of the annual revenue that we anticipate to receive from TIF 8 towards this bond issue. So we will have some additional revenue that we can begin to set aside and accumulate that might be able to be used to cash fund some of those kinds of requests in the future. If we did receive one that was large enough, we would consider going out for a bond issue or some other kind of borrowing, but I think we have lots of options to look at in the future.
Just to add to what Kathy said, we anticipate the tax payments to be somewhere around $11.3 to $11.4 million on an annual basis, and we anticipate our debt service to be around 9.9. So there'll be savings that we'll try to escrow on an annual basis to cash fund, as Kathy said.
And it's my understanding that the other taxing jurisdictions have been made aware that we're now budgeting less monies for their purposes than we were in the original project plan.
We have been trying to get in contact with all of them. We've not been successful in reaching all of them yet, but we will have a TIF review committee meeting on Thursday afternoon, and they'll all be present then.
I know this is probably premature, but what would be the yield you'd be thinking about that the bonds would pay?
Subject to market movement, and subject to this being rated what we think it will be rated. Since the city is providing a moral obligation, we believe this will be rated in the AA category, a notch below the person providing the moral obligation. Right now, in today's numbers, we're probably looking at something in the 3.8% yield, and that'd be an average at the true interest cost for the 21 years. I hope we can maintain that between now and then.
We all do. Any other questions? I want to congratulate the people who commented on this. It was a difficult subject to talk about, and they did a good job. Kathy, appreciate that. We appreciate your contributions as well.
Chairman, could I ask a question back on the budget?
Yes, sir.
I know we've passed it, but just curiosity. The contingency for the projects under design, 3.8, what are the contingencies under the projects under construction? I assume we had contingencies in there.
Each project has its own contingency fund in addition to the program contingency.
This runs about, this is about 10% on the projects under design.
Percentage is the contingency fund for the projects.
We start with a 10% contingency on the projects. The program is typically about another 10%. I think maybe if you're looking at that chart, the 3.8 is for the total program. It's not for one of the individual projects.
Yolanda.
Also a question relative to the budget. Under completed projects, the Marriott Botanical Gardens restaurant / band shell and the $7.6 million. What's the status on attracting a tenant for that restaurant location? And what are the hindrances towards finding a tenant?
I don't know the answer to that.
It's my understanding that that is the responsibility of the Marriott Gardens Foundation to secure an operator for the restaurant under their agreement with the trust and the city. I believe part of the difficulties they've been having is finding a restaurant operator that has the financial capacity. They were trying to find a local operator who had adequate financial capacity to open a new restaurant, and they've had difficulty identifying somebody who is really ready to take that project on at this point in time. I think they're continuing to look and work with people and try to find an operator, but that maybe we can get them here and they can answer that question for you.
And in the interim, it's being leased, rented out for various functions. It's getting a lot of publicity that way. People are impressed with the building.
And they do have, if you haven't been over there during downtown in December, they do have pop-up shops over there and some really nice retail, and people are using it when they go ice skating. There's some concessions in it. So it's working really well for that. So hopefully they can find an operator soon.
Larry?
Because they did find an operator for the kind of the hot chocolate environment that's going on over there right now. And I can't recall, Kathy, the name of the vendor that did that. It's somebody that we all heard of, I think.
Actually, I think that vendor backed out, and now the vendor who does the food service at Full Circle Bookstore is providing.
That's the one I've thought about,
Yep.
is running that. And that'll be kind of a test case, I think, to what kind of a market they can generate off of there over the next couple of weeks.
Is there any other? Yes.
Sorry, I have one additional question, or I hope one. In the resolution attached to item D, makes reference to the private placement tax anticipation note, which I assume in Project 180 is referred to as the Devon loan proceeds. Is that the same? 95 million, okay. And so the issuance in item D would fully retire that. What were the costs associated with that note and the interest rate, if any?
The interest associated with that is 5% on an annual basis.
Great. Thank you.
I almost hate to ask, are there any additional questions? We have our action right now is to approve a resolution. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution. Motion approved. Motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And the item is approved. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item E, is a report from the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation. And I saw some chamber people earlier in the building.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be with you today. I'm Kurt Foreman, the new Executive Vice President at the Chamber, and I have part of our team here with me. Jessica Herrera, who many of you may know, is our manager in retail, who works a lot closely with your staff. Mike Chumo, who's the lead point person on our business retention and expansion efforts, and then Mike Ogan, who leads our business recruitment and business development efforts. So we're glad to be with you today. I have two quick things I want to go over with you. One is a report that we, because of schedules, could not provide to you. It's been done, but we couldn't get here to coordinate our schedules to be able to present it to you, and that's our first quarter report on the work we do for and with you. And then I have a presentation, just a quick overview of the results of our current business retention and expansion efforts that Mike and the team have been underway on for the past year. During the first quarter of our work together, we've continued to do the SIP work that we do with Kathy and Brent and the staff to support you all. We've had a number of good projects come forward. We've continued to work with Boeing as an example, and that will be coming forward, I believe, in the coming weeks, but we continue to work on that. We've begun what I think will be one of the most important things we do in the next year or so, which is to continue to work with the staff on what we call the employment lands needs assessment, which really is sort of, now that we've been extremely successful as a region and as a community, how do we continue to be successful, and how do we make sure that we've got the kinds of product that our customers want, the ones who look here for the first time, and those, just as importantly or more importantly, those who want to continue to grow here and may have been here for decades. And so we want to make sure we've got that in underway. We've also been involved in celebrations, which is always important, from roofing companies to Centec, which was at one of the first days I was here in Oklahoma City. We were out at the celebration for Centec, which is the English company, or United Kingdom company, that makes the component for going down in the wells. And you may have seen in the paper this week that they're actually 6 months ahead of their plans and are actually hiring faster than they expected to, which is always a good sign for our market. We continue to tell the story, sort of the evangelism side, if you will, of our work, to get the story placed in lots of publications, both in the region, to tell our own residents about the successes going on in the region and also outside the area. And if you have never been to our Better Life Oklahoma City, OKC site, which we built originally to help key employers who were bringing staff from other markets here, that continues to get redone and updated, and we just did a major renovation to that as a staff as well. We've been at ICSC, which is the International Council of Shopping Centers, part of the retail strategy we have with you all. Jessica and Cynthia Reed, who you probably know, and some of our team have been at 3 ICSC events in the past few months, telling the story of Oklahoma City, and I think making a big difference there. So I'll leave the rest to your eyes. There's also under tabs A sort of a performance measurement view, a snapshot of just the first quarter. We're actually well into the second quarter, so these numbers are not as of today, but we are making good progress on engaging existing companies. The one thing that's been the biggest hurdle during the past few months has been the recruitment market, if you will, companies making decisions to go to new markets or to open in new locations. And we found typically during presidential elections there tends to be a sort of they take their eye off the ball and they watch what's going on, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, they watch that process. I think this past fall, in my experience, 20 years or so, this has been one of the seasons that's probably had the most impact in that regard, where people are watching that to see what happens. And so we've seen a slowing down of people's processes, not necessarily not looking, but slowing down their processes. So that's why the recruitment numbers are not where we'd like to see them, but we think that will pick up as we get into the new year. And unfortunately, the fiscal cliff kept that process going a little longer than it normally would have. But and then the second page of that performance shows you some of the retail activity we've had. And Jessica joined us back at the end of the summer and is in full bore right now, so we will catch up from the time of the transition of staff with Allison leaving and Jessica coming on board. And then the last one is just some backup sheets on wages. We're well ahead of the goals on average salary and that sort of thing. If you have questions about that, we'd always be happy to answer those. The big thing I wanted to share with you is sort of a quick summary of the findings of our over 300 visits with companies here in the area. I would say 90-some%, maybe 99% of those visits were with companies right in Oklahoma City proper. So I think a lot of that will be hopefully useful stuff for you. Obviously, you know our mission. Our job is to be the voice of business and to help the region move forward. Our team specifically focuses on existing business and new businesses so that we can create jobs and make things happen or encourage the creation of jobs. The targets we focus on, most of this is probably familiar to you, but it's always good for the audience and for all of us to remind ourselves. We focus on aerospace and military with the importance of that sector to our area. The bioscience and research is really a great up-and-coming part of our economy that the area has made such a great stride in over the years, and we need to continue to put pressure on that to continue to grow. Logistics, energy, obviously, advanced manufacturing, and then IT and shared services are all things that we feel are key parts of our future and our current success. In terms of our BRE approach, we make visits on companies. There's nothing better than walking through someone's office or someone's plant, if it's a manufacturing operation, and seeing whether the equipment is running, whether the parking lot is full, and making all that happen. That's really important. You sort of get the body language as much as the yes or no's to answers to questions. We listen for the word-of-mouth opportunities of people recommending companies that they think we should go see. So if you ever run across a company that you feel would benefit from our formal visitation, please pass that along through staff. We'd love to do that. And then obviously any kind of inquiries people would make and raise their own hand and say, hey, I could use some help, we like to do that. And we often do ongoing research as well. We visited, as I mentioned, over 300 companies during the past year. We also, of those companies, they created over 4,500 jobs, which is great, and over $500 million of investment. We think that's very important. It rarely makes headlines because it's an aggregate of a lot of different companies, but the reality is that kind of investment in those job creation is sort of that floor that we hope to grow above with recruitments, but without that, lots of things don't happen in our economy. So we think that's an encouraging sign. Plus, just like you do in your own business probably, if you're a restaurateur or you're a manufacturer, if your existing customers don't buy or don't come back, that's a sign that there's a problem. So when existing employers continue to buy the product, if I can use that term, that's a very good sign that we're on the right track. 71% of the companies told us that they have further plans to add within 12 to 18 months. You can see some of the things that they mentioned they're happy with: city government, the cost of doing business, the leadership of the community and how we come together, the general economy here, and also the quality of life. The things they mentioned generally, and our questions are broad, so they're not down to which street corner would you like us to fix. to help you out. If they share that, we try to get that, but often it's a broader question. But the things they continue to mention to us that are of concern, education, particularly K-12, the workforce training and making sure that we've got the skill sets we need, transportation, whether that's roads and highways, that's always a factor, and that's often an emotional factor, even if they can't tell us the exact section that they'd like us to work on. And then, as you've been reading a lot about, the state's been looking into this workers' comp and health care because of a lot of the stuff with the Federal Affordable Care Act. That's been top of mind for a lot of employers. Whether they're excited about it or not excited about it, it's a key issue. So those are the things they've been telling us. These are the 5 issues, the sort of top reasons companies told us that they're growing in our area: the cost of doing bad business, our tax rates, our labor costs, our pro-business attitude. I think a lot of us talk about that, but the reality is there's a lot of places that don't have that, so it's good to keep pushing for that. Locally owned companies that they are committed here and they love the quality of life. Incentives, as you see, is on the list, but it's not the top thing. If those other things don't exist, usually the incentives aren't going to make up for that. So we're proud of what you all and other people have done to make a difference here. And then the 5 things that they're really not happy with, and these echo some of the things I just mentioned. In some cases, they may be landlocked at their site and not able to grow where they are, and that's always a risk for future consolidation. Skilled workforce, that's a national issue, not really a local issue, but we need to continue to work on that to make sure we have the people we need to be successful. Workers' comp, transportation, and then K-12, and particularly soft skills, which is, in my experience in other markets in the country, is a drumbeat that a lot of parts of the country beat on, that's not there anymore. So that's just a quick summary. You've got our brochure. That brochure is available if you would like copies to send to other people. We send that out to all the companies who have been interviewed so that they can get a sense of whether they're different than other people in terms of their responses, and we thank them for their continued effort. And the nice thing is we don't just talk to a company and then not see them for years and years and years. Our staff follows up with them, sometimes just by phone to check in, how's it going, and we have a sort of portfolio of companies that we're tracking at any given time. So we think that's really important. But most of all, we're appreciative of your efforts because you help make our job easier, you help make the product what it is, and you allow us to have the resources to do the work that we all want to see done. Anything I can answer?
Other questions? Yeah, Frank.
I know we have major effort to recruit companies. What kind of a program or efforts do we have to recruit workers? I assume if we're going to run against the problem of employers not being able to attract people that they need, and so you're not going to be able to expand.
That's really, I think, for the next decade in our nation, I think that's going to be the key. Regions that are able to successfully provide the people, whether they're new folks coming into the area, whether we grow them ourselves and train them, or we get what I call boomerangs, folks who may have grown up here who left for some reason and want to come back. We need to be working all those angles. The Chamber specifically has a number of initiatives that are web-based to communicate about if you're a person, let's say Jim is recruiting a new person to the area, they've never been here, their spouse doesn't know about the area, and they go, I'm really not sure. I've seen the Thunder, which really helps us a lot, but they may not just know the area. So there are tools that he as a business owner can use to make that easier. To show them what it's like to live here and experience our great market. So we've created those tools to put in the hands of employers. We also, as you know, during the Boeing effort, we put 50 people on an airplane. I think Rhonda was a part of that at one time. I wasn't here then, but we put 50 people on an airplane and spent multiple days in Long Beach talking with families about their situation so that we could help them physically get here. So we will be always happy to do that if we need to in the right situation. I think you'll see with the economy down the way it's been nationally for the last couple years, a lot of people thought we had a reprieve from that issue, but I really think it's coming back fast and furious. So I think you'll see new ideas coming together to start doing even more on that, whether it's going after schools in addition to our great universities to get other young people to come here and start their careers here or complete their careers here. So we'll be working on that, and I'm sure other folks will be as well. That's the next frontier. That's the next frontier.
Other questions? Kurt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is another presentation. This is the quarterly report of the technology venture that we're helping on. You ready?
Rex Smitherman with I2E is here to talk about the Business Launch Initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome back.
Trustees, thank you for the opportunity to get back with you once a quarter and tell you what we've been doing on this initiative that was funded now almost 2.5 years ago. And we are in year 3 of a 3-year program. Today I'll give you just a couple of slides on the activities of the quarter, and then we'd also like to show you one of the companies that we're working with that have used some of the services of this initiative. First thing I just want to remind the board was what the services include that we're offering as a part of this initiative, and it's a pretty impressive list of things that we do for these startup companies here in Oklahoma City area. And but as we go through all this, I like to remind everyone what the things that these companies are getting help with in order to make them successful and to grow here in Oklahoma City. I'm not going to go through these, but as you can see, there's some pretty significant help that we provide to these small startup companies. Specifically, these two things are two of the things that in this initiative that were not here in Oklahoma City prior to the start of the initiative. One is our executive and residence services, which kind of gets to Trustee McPherson's point about talent. One of the things we do is bring mentoring, and we try to bring talent to these companies to help them get started and work directly with our client companies. The second piece is bringing in nationally and internationally recognized experts to provide not only their advice, but almost educational opportunities for these CEOs and their staff on some of the really tough issues of starting a small technology-based company. In the first quarter, which is typically a slower quarter, July and August are pretty slow times for what we do, but we still were fairly robust during the quarter. We worked with 7 different companies that received some of our executive in residence program services, our CFO in residence and our sales executive in residence programs. We had one training event during the quarter. Our Angel Group, which was part of this initiative that started here in Oklahoma City, screened 6 different investment opportunities, and had 2 of those 6 that were screened were actually presented to the Angel Group for consideration. None of those deals were closed in the first quarter that were presented. As you can see, year to date, the same numbers, but as you look at the last 2 years, we've had over 60 companies that have had an opportunity to receive services from this initiative for either our executive in residence or our entrepreneur in residence services. We've also provided 20 student fellowships over that time frame, and many events. We've looked at a lot of deals, and our angels here have invested a little over $500,000 closed investments in local companies. We thought it would be, and we think it's a good thing to do each time we come to this group, to give you a sense of who are the folks that are getting these services. And so today we thought we'd give you an overview of a company, that a new startup that has been one of our clients here in Oklahoma City. And we have about a 2-minute video that we produce for our clients. And this is about a company called Moleculara. We need to turn that up. We need to start back over. Is it not working? Start it over.
My name is Craig Shimasaki. I am the CEO of Molecular Labs. and our testing technology is a treatable form of autism called PANDAS. PANDAS is an acronym for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Strep. And the condition is that a child gets an infectious disease such as strep, and it triggers normally antibodies, and then these children begin to manifest neurological disorders. But the underlying condition is actually autoimmune rather than directly neurologic in origin. It is a autistic-like condition that is characterized by obsessive-compulsive disorders, various types of tics, and other types of behavior similar to autism. The test is very important. It was actually developed by Dr. Madeline Cunningham at the University of Oklahoma. The key to this is that you want to identify patients who are actually, rather than neurologic in origin, their condition is actually immunologic. And in doing this, these patients can be treated with existing therapy that's already out there. We are very close to closing the next round of about $500,000 to be able to set up the clinical laboratory at the university, and we do believe that we will be able to offer this test sometime at the end of the year, possibly beginning of next year. It's always very exciting to be able to discover or be a part of discovering something. So something like a clinical laboratory or a test and for a product that doesn't exist, one of the important things is to be able to see something that would be of vast value and used for many needy children.
We produce these videos for our client companies to help them with their fundraising efforts with investors. And I'm going to tag team, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, introduce David Thomason, who's our Vice President of Investments for I2E. And David's going to give you a couple of slide overview of Moleculera Labs, which is the subject of the company that you just saw, and what this project does for them and what their plans are for the next few years. So I'll introduce David Thomason.
Mr. Chairman. It's really exciting to come up and when you can put a face on what the money is doing. And what we're really able to do, we believe, with the Moleculera Labs is to go and develop a testing and diagnostic tool where none, absolutely none, exists today that will help physicians identify treatment protocols for certain, yes, treatable forms of autism. So think about, everyone knows 1 in 88 children have some level of autism. Just think about the opportunity that did not exist before to treat that child for a immunological disease versus a neurological disease that could potentially release them from that autistic confines that they're in. And so what you really have is the making of building a business. You've addressed a consumer need. A child is priceless. Parents are finding us. They have completed a 1,000-patient study. And what I wanted to kind of show you is how we're trying to bring our services to some of the technologies that are existent by world-class researchers here in Oklahoma to start to develop commercialization and sustainable businesses around those technologies. And so what we've been able to do with Dr. Craig Shimashaki is to work with the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center, Madeline Cunningham, and what we've been able to do is we've looked at her data. She put together about a 1,000-patient study, and so what we've been able to do is, in that video, he said, we hope to close. We have now closed. We've put $540,000 available to the company, and they began all their biostatistical data work to create predictive mathematical algorithms around the data that has been collected in her 1,000-patient study. And so what we're able to do is, with that information, and what's important is I want you to understand the things don't happen overnight. It takes time. And so we actually started working and talking to them in September of 2011. And so what we did then is, after September 2011, we actually integrated that company and that concept with another student team at the Oklahoma City University to compete in the Governor's Cup, which is a very well-respected business plan competition that encourages entrepreneurship for high-tech diversification of our economic base. And so what we did is we put this together with the team, and that team did a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount, the quality of some of the graduating students that we have. And the mentor was the now CEO of the company, Dr. Craig Shimashaki. And so he had the opportunity to mentor those students, and in exchange, in a win-win, he had the chance to get a tremendous amount of research from students. And it's amazing when you're doing research and you're calling people. Sometimes the customers will tell a student something they wouldn't tell a business person. And so it's a really nice integration, and so we spent 3 or 4 months doing that work. They've actually now brought down and are becoming a paying tenant in the PHF Foundation in the park, so they're actually starting to make a very small initial contribution back to the economy. And some of the services that they've received from us is a CFO and residence training. We did a lot of work with the company with regard to financial modeling. The first thing the company wanted to do is go spend $1.5 to $2 million to build their own lab. And we're going, you haven't proven anything yet. Can we work with the University of Oklahoma and contract a little space in Dr. Madeline Cunningham's lab and prove for 6 months that the test has market viability, that it will be accepted and recognized by physicians? It took us 3 months. We had to get regulatory approval that they can actually do a CLIA certification on public university property, because when we rent it, it actually is no longer university public property. So it's a tandem and a collaborative effort between the public sector and the private sector to come together to create a more capital, lower risk efficiency to building a company. And so what we've done is we've now executed those agreements. We've shown this company to our Seed Step Angels, which is a core, because probably 90% of the deals in the United States are funded by angels, not venture capitalists. We actually got a lot of excitement from them. In the $540,000 that we just closed, we had 4 members from Seed Step Angels Invest, a total of $125,000. I2E with one of our new small state business credit initiatives through the U.S. Treasury Department led the round with $270,000. We received an investment from another non-Seed Step Oklahoma angel and 2 from out of state. So you can show the diversification that we were able to pull together in a syndicate to fund the deal. And then we've also had Craig participate in our Who Wants to Be an Entrepreneur, where we had about 300 to 400 students. He participated in a panel. He believes in giving back to some of the students that have been involved in the program. But you can kind of start to see how some of those things have come together. What we're really projecting, if we're successful, he is now going to launch for revenue in January of 2013. Well, I should say first quarter. He hopes January. Well, I will say the first quarter, so I'm going to hedge my bet a little bit in case it slips into February. 2013. What's of interest, we already have a backlog of customers begging for the test. I mean, begging. We've had one influential Oklahoma go to the governor and say, I want my child tested, because the university had to close it down because it became too much of a commercial enterprise instead of a true IRB. So we have a backlog of tests, so we're very excited about it, and we're going to start launching with revenues, and we're using FTEs. We've hired a couple of people in the company. But we expect that as the company grows, we're going to probably approach in the next 3 years, probably somewhere between 20 and 35 high-tech lab jobs, very attractive jobs from that standpoint. We will probably be driving the vast majority of our revenue from exports outside the state to physicians in other states. Obviously, we'll be doing some here in Oklahoma, but that revenue should represent. So it's a great business. It's a centralized lab. They take the blood samples around the United States, around the world. They fly them into Oklahoma City, and we're going to do all the testing right here. Great business. Import revenues. So we're looking that we'll probably have about 20 to 35 jobs that will be created with regards to that. Now remember, we started this in December of 2011. Here's kind of where we've been able to advance. We have actually signed the licensing agreement with the University of Oklahoma. Usually takes about 120 days to negotiate those. Those are all in place. We, as I said previously, we've closed the $540,000 first capital round. We've already proactively began planning the next $1.5 million round so that we can launch that in probably March of next year. We have finalized the diagnostic test using biostatisticians that have been hired and consultants to put it together to come up with the 5-panel assay, and we begin to launch IP protection around those assays. We've actually applied and have received the CLIA certified lab for the little cutout space in the OU Health Sciences Center. So we now have a commercial entity that we can legally deliver and accept revenue for those tests. And again, we're looking to start it in the first quarter. It's pretty exciting when you've got the opportunity to build a business that has high customer need, meets an unmet need, can be extremely profitable and create wealth for the investors of that company, create diversification of high-tech jobs, and have a tremendous societal benefit at the same time. It's very rare that you got the opportunity to see what I consider a win-win-win-win. And so we're really excited about this company, and hopefully that puts a face on some of the things we're trying to do with the funding that has been so graciously provided by this community.
Are there any questions? Yeah.
I do, thank you. Thank you for the update. I always appreciate hearing what you're doing. On this one, you indicate a $100,000 proof of concept angel investment. Also talked about helping them with like the audio, video work to help. Just curious, for them, give us an example of what you anticipate you'd spend, and then how does that compare to maybe the garden variety that you're trying to inspire out there?
See if I understand your question. The $100,000 proof of concept that was alluded to there was actually raised by a out-of-state angel investor. It was a very wealthy individual who had an autistic child who actually wanted to invest because he saw the potential, the need, and had a personal philanthropic interest in that area. And so it's usually what we call family and friends is frequently the first high-risk money that comes into the deal, and there's usually multiple motivations besides making money. And that person put that in. As far as a capital path, we dramatically impacted the capital path of this company because the entrepreneur wanted to raise $1.5 to $2 million, build this huge, great big lab, and said they will come. And we're saying, no, let's do it piece by piece. Can we do it through the University of Oklahoma? Will the federal regulators allow us? And so we cut, and we're going to basically now be able to do 100% of what he wanted to do for $540,000 versus $1.5 million to $2 million. If it works, raising the next $1.5 million will not be a problem. All we're doing then is we're taking a proven commodity, a proven business process, and we're scaling it. And so what we've done is we've reduced the risk to investors that might go in it by a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio. And so it's very substantial, but yet we're going to see if the fundamental product is of equal quality by just doing it with less capital. And that's something, one, I'll be real frank, I don't know if this entrepreneur could have raised $1.5 million or $2 million in such a pre-revenue state. We worked real hard, and it took us about 90 days to even get $540,000 raised in various forms of due diligence. So by being able to reposition that person into a more logical, progressive steps based on the size of capital markets that are available, we think we actually increase the probabilities of this company being successfully formed. Now, the company is going to be successful based on its technology and the execution of its delivery, but we think by putting the services that we've talked about, we got it launched, and it may or may not have gotten launched under the other methodology.
That's your question? Are there other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is item G, which is a change order amendment in the Bicentennial Park area. Kathy or Eric, if you're still here, would you like to say something about that?
There's a couple of representatives from Public Works here, but it appears that most of the change order was associated with repairs to the City Hall fountain and putting some skateboarding-proof elements on some of the granite walls and some things in Bicentennial Park. But the City Hall fountain developed a leak during the construction, so they made repairs to it, and there were some other electrical changes and some other repairs that were found in the field during construction.
Anybody who's not seen that fountain, it's really a dramatic element in that new park. Are there any other questions, comments? Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
That motion made and second. Please cast your votes. And the item is approved. Next item, item 5, is General Manager's report. It was provided to the trustees in advance of this meeting. Do you have any questions or comments on it? Very good report. Very thorough. Easy to read. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Any comments from the public? Comments from the staff? Comments from the trustees? We are adjourned. Thank you.